problema. A dopo. Okay, so the video doesn't work, so there's only the audio because the camera lost the alignment with the system. So, a few things about last time. First of all, everything is clear. Sorry, phone in the bucket now, please. Everything is clear about last time? There are questions? Okay. So we have been discussing about when and if makes sense to apply a defensive or offensive strategy. And we have seen several examples. On Monday, we've been focusing on a case of an industry that clearly applies offensive strategy, expanding on markets. Concerning offensive strategies, there is a point to make about the so-called disruption phenomena, which is a typical phenomena that happens when in a certain market situation there is a newcomer, a bit like Casella wines, or yeah, I would say more Casella wines than the other example, feels that there is a space, there is a gap to be filled in a market that apparently seems difficult to reach and far away. And a bit like Casella wines, moving from Australia to United States in a wine industry, this gap could represent even a small gap, or in case of Casella wine, an even not existing gap, because in case of Casella wine, they were mainly looking for non-customers. In some case, could be both, could be non-customer or a small area where you may think that an aggressive strategy may result in an interesting result, because the market is, if you look at rationally, a kind of red ocean. So it's not that attractive for a newcomer. But you may think that taking the right steps, there are gaps to be filled, and those gaps may guarantee the possibility to reach further and further new objectives. When there is such a phenomenon where in a red ocean market, you have a newcomer or more newcomers which are able to reach a certain position in a market share in a red ocean market, pushing the already existing competitors, well established in the territory, in the market, aside, or in the upper layers of the market, the one that are guaranteeing either a premium price or a higher margin, this phenomena is called disruption. And in order to understand this particular way of attacking certain market, I think the best way could be to look at this example. If it works, yes, okay. That is represented by Toyota Motor Company. Toyota Motor Company was there already before World War II, but of course the whole industrial system in Japan was completely destroyed after World War II. So basically after the war, they had almost, there's no way to stop this annoying bar, no? Seems not. also. Hello. No, wait, is it? Mhm. Well, anyway, um, especially in the first figure here at the bar, also the cars that are running here in the. Let me first share this with your colleagues. Okay. Okay, so the first cars that, as I said, they produced after World War II, they were rather simple cars. The whole industrial system need to be rebuilt. So basically, were this kind of cars, very simple and mainly used for commercial and service purposes. So there were small tracks like the one on 1947 for production, for either small, very small companies. And the idea behind was to offer this very basic product, very easy to repair, even for the technology at the time, very, very basic, no frills product, in the United States. Um, so Toyota, after World War II, surprisingly, started to provide small numbers of these kind of trucks, or if you see still in 1947, this is a very annoying bar, but anyway useful. Also the compact passenger car production. So the near the US market, and they start to provide trucks and small cars to segments of consumers in the United States, which really couldn't afford American producer car. By that time, the American producers were owning the 100% of the American market practically, so with very few, quite a few exceptions. So they were dominant in the market and strong. But at the other side, there was still existing segment, fraction of potential consumers that couldn't afford a car. And Toyota cars were really cheap. So they start to launch these very basic models after World War II, up to the beginning of the 50s. Basically two models, so the truck and the small car you have seen in the picture, with no possibility of choosing different models or different motors, two products. So in that sense, it resembles a bit the strategy of Casella wine, not very basic product. The difference is that there were aggressive market that was already existing, people that need perfectly what the car was, and they needed. They were quite successful in that, and in the 50s, they begin to make facilities in Brazil, in Australia. And they opened in 1959 a facility in the United States, first a commercial division, then facility. You see the model becomes to be more sophisticated. So Corona, Toyota Corona 1964, Toyota Corolla 1966. And there were cars that you could buy in different categories with different models and with different customization. So they start to have in, let's say, 10 years, 10, 15 years. up to 1966. Different models, facilities in the United States, and a certain respectable market share in the United States. Moving always bottom up. So from the first categories of consumers like plumbers, joiners, or whatsoever, start to gain a market share also in the consumer, the mass market and the consumer market, stealing some of the lower layers of the market share to American producers. So coming from the bottom and selling their Toyota Crown, as you see here, Toyota Corona, etc., to the categories of consumers that still couldn't afford very big and powerful cars, but they still need transportation, they still need to go to work and so on. They start to produce family cars, still very cheap cars, and up from, let's say, beginning from the second half of the 60s, their factory started to a very long-term strategic plan in order to gain a certain working standards inside the plant. So in 1967, I believe, let's see in this bar, I don't remember exactly the year, but yeah, in 1962, they signed a labor management joint declaration, so quite an advanced system in order to regulate the relationship between management and labor forces. In 1970, they had the Japan Quality Control Award, so they start to promote both conditions, a way to improve working conditions inside the plant, and also this connection that is nowadays quite kind of stereotype also, that connects Japanese card with the word quality, no? Quality management and trustworthy and so on. They started in the 70s, involving very much their production with the concept of quality management and quality assurance at all levels. Because having behind their shoulders years of involvement of their workers into the process of production, they were able to create a quite new business model that was involving at all levels in the production and the improvement of the quality of production the workforce, not only the management at all levels, but also the workforce. So the fact that they invested so much in quality, so in 1965, they won the first Deming application prize, it is a quality standard plan. And the fact that they won it again the Japan Quality Control in 1970, as you can see here, show that they invested very much in improvement of production and making the production more efficient and effective. And also the fact that in the 70s, they open also a research and development facility into the United States. So not just in Japan, in the United States. What happened to the market then? In the market in the 70s, they start new, as you can see, new models, totally new models, slowly taking into consideration also models of cars that you couldn't anymore define as a mass market product. No? You can see here the Toyota 2000 GT and also the Toyota Celica, the Toyota Carina, as you can see here in this bar. So cars that step by step still in the bottom-up strategy that I mentioned, they were able to conquer more and more consumers in the United States, no? Cars that were considered reliable, cheap but reliable, good quality, so lower uh, rate of malfunctions, no? Lower cost of maintenance and so on. So the Japanese quality becomes really the mantra of the 80s, no? And also the worry of the American producers, step by step, because at the very beginning, they were even not considered as a competitor, but of course, gaining space, gaining market shares, they change rapidly. So imagine like the first 15 years between the end of World War II and the 60s invested in creating an infrastructure, a reliable market share, and the next 15 years, up to the 80s, in creating a reputation and the condition to improve either their models and their working condition and market share. So we come in the 80s. In the 80s, Toyota is a reality, no? Able to, you can see here, no, to make very important agreements, opening new production facilities. They started with the Toyota Camry, and in the 1989, as you can see here in the bar, 1989 with the Lexus, Toyota Lexus. Toyota Lexus represents, we already mentioned something I think about Toyota in the beginning of the course, represents another shift, very important. Because if for more than 40 years you were known as a producer of cars, mass market, reliable, also cheap, and you start to imagine a product that is a luxury product, is a huge shift. Moreover, they do this in 1989 with a new mark, with a new trademark. Toyota Lexus, moreover, is not a brand, it's really a different company inside the Toyota company, with different managers, with different sales network, with different factors. So, if you look at that from a point of view of the strategist, you should be surprised, no? Because it's a company that's coming from Japan, so a country that lost World War II, so a country with no industrial at the time, and you are able to become a market leader in a red ocean in the automotive field, that is strategic field of the United States, beating the concurrence of American producers that were already there since years, since decades. How is it possible? It's the same question that not only for Toyota, but for other companies, strategists ask themselves. Because it's, if you look at their history, really, there is something that was hard to explain with the normal parameters of economy, management. So they start to think that there is strategy, this phenomenon, that could be explained. I stopped sharing this and I shift to this one, to this video, just to let you understand my point. This video is done graphically in a very simple way, but it helps, I think, to understand my point. Okay, let's try to share again. Condividi. Okay, I don't put the volume because I explain myself. I'm more interested that you take a look to the images. Okay, so the disruption phenomenon. So the situation I depicted at the very beginning is the one where you have a market share, United States in this case, you have an incumbent, so you have a situation where there are already companies in control, and you have a newcomer, no? The orange one, which is trying to enter the market. Toyota in 1947. Well, in this animation, you see that some things are happening step by steps. The disruption phenomenon is the one where the newcomer overcomes the incumbent. So imagine this situation. We have been discussing, talking about blue ocean strategy. That's as a blue ocean strategy, you are interested in what are called non-consumers, non-customers, I would say. So people that is, in the case of Toyota, couldn't afford even having a need that couldn't afford a car by the end of World War II in the United States market. And let's imagine that as well as for Casella wines, the non-customers were the not wine drinkers. In this case, for Toyota in 1947, United States market, the non-consumers were mainly people that need a car, couldn't afford a car. Then you have every market is structured in this way. You have the mainstream. The mainstream, it's about us, no? Somebody who is consuming on a regular basis certain good or a service, whatever, I can afford that service or good. Then there is the next tire. What is the next tire? The next tire, what happens just right above the mainstream. So always, as soon as you move up a narrow and extremely profitable niche of consumers that can afford more, no? You enter slowly in the luxury, no, area. People that can afford, of the same good and service, a version that is luxury, with more secondary services, for instance, or with design, enriched, in other words, by not tangible attributes that have little to do with the quality of the good and the service itself, but more a bunch of characteristics that are around the service. The same way where you can buy a pair of athletic shoes or you can buy Jordans, okay? The same way you can buy a shirt or a shirt of Valentino, okay? Next tire. Tires that can afford of the same basic characteristic more added to this. You can imagine that almost every market was working like that. Toyota in 1947 was here. Non-consumers. American producers were in mainstream. A small fragment of American producers and a small fragment of European producers were also involved in the next tire, the upper tires, luxury cars. BMW, Mercedes, Ferrari. The situation at the beginning. Let's see how the animation goes further. No? So let's say producers are mainly focused on the mainstream. What about the newcomer? The newcomer generally starts with the non-consumers. No? Starts, in other words, in a way like Toyota did, that is not so relevant for incumbents. The main thing is such a small fragment, and in the end, it's a fragment that is not particularly participating to our revenues, global revenues. Let's give them that, no? This is true, but it could be the beginning of the end. Because in the meantime, you give the possibility to a newcomer to establish in a certain market without taking a real defensive strategy or neither an offensive strategy. Maybe because you can't, maybe because you're not so much interested, maybe because of both. Yeah, but anyway, you leave a space. And you start to think, let's concentrate on the mainstream. They will never get to the mainstream. Hmm? And even more, they will never get to the next type. The problem is that as soon as you move up in the pyramid, uh, the market shrinks. And at the same time, the customer belonging to mainstream and the next tier are always asking more. Hmm? They have more requests. They pretend more from your product and service. Their expectations are higher. So it's true that is an area where that is more profitable. It is also an area where you have to stay really be careful. So you have to provide the right services, you have to provide the right customer care, the right after-sale and maintenance service, and so on. But let's say the reasoning of incumbents is, generally speaking, that we don't compete where we are not interested in competing. Let's compete where it's really important for us. In the end, the market is in our hands. Hmm? It's a rather human way of thinking. The newcomer, so, starts establishing in the lower segment of the market. In general, when it becomes visible to the incumbents, it's already in the mainstream. Exactly like Toyota in the second half of the 50s. So you have a company which is already able to deal at least with the part of the mainstream market. And again, even inside this mass market, the reason is more or less the same, or could be the same. We are not interested, no? But that gives other possibility for the newcomer to know the market and to raise the bar. Uh, it guaranteed, for instance, to Toyota in no more than 10, 12 years to open up facilities, first commercials, then facilities, production, into the American market. By that time, the newcomer is already in the mainstream. Hmm? From the point of view of the incumbents, it's like a poison that is already circulating in your body, difficult to stop. Hmm? Moreover, that gives to the newcomer that is used as a business model and to compete in areas that are really overcrowded, road ocean, where the margin is very thin, to be in an area where they can breathe more. They have a bigger margin. Hmm? And then what happens? Uh, the newcomer don't stop there. Why they should stop there? So the reaction is sometimes by the incumbents to move again upward. The wrong strategic reasoning is, well, where is the higher margin? In the upper tires. Let's move there. Hmm? There we have customers that can guarantee us higher margin, no? And so that is the attractive segment. But the volumes are made in the mainstream. And the other mistake is to consider that just because Toyota was producing something that was reliable but cheap, it will stay for that forever. Who says so? Nobody says so. But in the minds of management, that was the idea. But there is accumulating enough resources, there is time where the newcomer start to invest also in design, exactly like Toyota did. Start to invest in upper layer. 90, 89, Toyota, Lexus, luxury. The newcomer is already moving from the mainstream to the upper stream. Very, very slowly, step by step. But in the end, what happens? That the newcomer or the newcomers, plural, are able to compete and sometimes to outcompete in this continuous process of following, no? to compete, to outcompete the incumbent in their market till the moment that they become also leader. Okay, and the story goes, and so the story goes. So you have this red bullet here. Who is that red bullet? It's another newcomer that may do the same process again at the expenses of the orange one. The process never stops. So it's up to us as a strategist to use the resources that we have been talking about, the models that Porter, for instance, studied, in order to assess the landscape and try to figure out strategies able to reduce this risk. How is that possible? An answer is already provided by the choice that Toyota made. Toyota is coming from this process. So it's an effect of a disruption process. Disruption process, that is a definition that the strategy applies to this case, also in a smaller scale, in a smaller case, also to process of disruption that are concerning only a single line of products, only a single market. The process is always the same, no? What Toyota did, so if you come back to the original case, you know, and we leave this, and we close this animation, or at least we try. So let's go back to our annoying bulb. And let's move to 1989. Lexus. What happened then afterwards? Several things. First of all, interpreted in the eyes, in the perspective of disruption, Toyota, Lexus, was a possible strategic answer. In other words, studying the phenomena, one thing that in Toyota they very soon realized is that in order to prevent the same situation they had to face, the American producers had to face, it was very difficult to prevent a possible newcomer to do the same, to perform the same process, having the same management in charge to manage and to react to possible newcomers with the same persons in all situations. So, in other words, a company that was perceived at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, as a mass market producer, cars for workers, cars for families, had a double issue to face. So why don't imagine a strategy able to face both problems? What were the problems? First problem was thinking to launch a luxury car being perceived as a mass market producer. And look that many big companies had very painful problems in doing that. Big company, you know, the pens producer, big. Tell me something, you know, big. The pen. I have a big at home, I think. Well, okay. When they become successful, almost in the same years, uh, they had they had a huge uh, uh, strategy in order to broaden their offering, and they add, like they have, razors, lighters, no, and other stuff like that, not just pens. But when they bought Waterman stylographic pen, the ball pen, didn't succeed because in the image of consumers, they were producing ball pens, not stylographic pens. So the fact of having a luxury pen in the end with the brand or with the connection with big didn't work out. So there was a typical merging acquisition strategy that where 1 plus 1 was -2, not 3 or 4, didn't produce any added value. In the mind of the consumers, was impossible to connect a luxury product with Bic, because Bic was a disposable pen that you could buy in boxes. How the hell you want to connect that with a pen that is even possibly a collection item? Didn't work out. They had to change the strategy there. So, from the point of view of Toyota, being worried of this shift and how the consumers will welcome the strategy was a realistic worry, something to be really preoccupied about. So, first point, how we can produce a luxury car being Toyota. Second, how we can prevent Indian, Koreans, produce other Japanese producers to do the same at our expenses that we did in the United States. Because now we are the leaders. We are not anymore a newcomer. Answering to this strategic, let's call it pain, was difficult. The answer, as I said, was Lexus. Lexus is a luxury brand, but is a brand that is autonomous from Toyota. It's not Toyota luxury, it's Lexus. So the idea behind was to have a different mark, slightly connected with Toyota, but different, independent, so that the reputation and the way consumers would consider this mark was not so much influenced by the brand Toyota. It was independent. Behind the brand, they create a management. And that is important because if you want realistically play and fight in a world with newcomers in the lower segment of the market, you can do that with a management that has to take a daily care also the luxury brands. It doesn't work because the way of selling the cars, the way of producing the cars, the way of promoting the brand and so on are completely different. And a manager cannot be shrink and divided into two different women or men. One has to take care of something, the other one has to take care of something else. So, in other words, they thought that the best way to cope with the possible disruption phenomena was to divide management and to take care of different things, different management for different things. That's what they did, and was quite successful in the end. So, management of Toyota Car Company able to deal with the mass market, with management prepared to deal with the problem of mass market consumer. Lexus, made by management, able to deal with the completely different request of luxury car consumers. So that was an answer that could cope with both things, and that explains, at least in part. Then, of course, there are the tangible attributes. The car well made, the car had interesting design, and so on. Okay, but from the strategic point of view, these two actions explain a lot of the success of this action. An action that was able in the 90s to overcome in quite a few years the market share of BMW and Mercedes in the United States. So not bad at all. Lexus, able to overcome BMW and Mercedes. Not bad from many point of view. We are in Europe, so BMW and Mercedes for us are rather normal to see. But in the American market, they were synonymous also European quality, no? Design. So the fact is even more interesting, no? Japanese car able to do that. But they did, in fact. And then they follow the same logic. This logic didn't stop with Lexus. It continues. So that almost 10 years ago, 1997, 8 years ago, they launched Toyota Prius. That is another step, interesting to notice. Still in direction of disruption. What happens in the end of the 90s? Well, at least it happens in the global market some year later. But let's say at the end of the 90s, the warning about sustainability and environment was already an issue. The first serious attempt to make social and environmental reports, financial records, belong to that type. The declaration about sustainability, the Brundtland report, is from 1987 at the end. So the definition of sustainability is only 10 years before. But anyway, they started to raise the bar, considering the fact that in their expectation, from the strategic point of view, they could figure out that in the next coming years, another possible attempt at disruption, like in fact happened, could be represented by a newcomer or already an existing company with creating a new brand, able to deal with customers that were really sensitive to environmental issues. I'm talking about the hybrid car and the electric cars. By that time, there were prototypes. Toyota was the first company to launch an hybrid car. Prius was, in their strategy, an answer to that. No? Toyota company with Prius takes care. This graph you have. I can't enlarge it, unfortunately, but you have, let's say, a general idea of the evolution from that we've been talking about to the next one. To enter to the sustainability market. So to give step by step an answer to consumers interested in hybrid cars and progressively in electric cars. So the launch of Prius had this aim to deal with this kind of consumers. So what I want to say is that this search for disruption continues, or the search for calm down and mitigate the effect of disruption continues. So Price was launched in 1997. Then, as you can see, there are other intervention in technology, the partnering in robotics, and so on. that represent after 2012 75 anniversary of what Toyota company was celebrated, represented a particular strategy. So remember this word, disruption, because it's something that you can notice in several other situations. And that gives a very important lesson to learn. Maybe the most important one is how dangerous can be for a company, especially a company which is incumbent, a big company, no? Strong in several markets, to lose or not have at all uh, a good capacity of keeping update their market insight, understanding what consumers expect from their product and service, and the evolution of these expectations. Mm? Um, if this happened in the 50s, and then after the other years, 50s, 60s, and so on, imagine nowadays where the expectation and the attitude of the consumer, I would say that changes every day, but almost changes very fast. So having and gaining market insight of customers, potential customers or non-customers is very important. So all the campaigns that from time to time should be done in order to gain this insight, interviewing customers, analyzing what competitors do, analyze the trends in your own market are very important, because disruption is also a matter of time, no? You can make interventions in other words, sooner. If American producers could anticipate certain moves of Toyota, the history would be different. In fact, they expected more than 25 years to invest in quality management in their field, in their industries. The first reaction were, let's go against Japanese, no? To make a kind of fight on the image of Japanese producers, more than thinking that if the Japanese were there with their cars, probably was responsibility of their bad management at the time. So if you don't gain market insight, your reactions are reactions that can be either wrong or even worse than the current situation. So it's very easy to go against to a competitor from the point of view of marketing and image, neglecting the fact that if the competitor is there, could be an answer to a lack of quality, of a lack of capacity of meeting customer expectation that comes from your side. If they are there, there is a reason. Hmm? So defensive strategy that mainly they had in place was defending on the point of view of the fact that we are American, you are Japanese, so our cars are better by definition. And on the other side, raising the bar. So moving to upper layers, raising the cost and the cost of regulations and so on. But these are all defensive strategies. If you want to deal with disruption, you have to be also and to have a mix of actions that are also offensive. Improvement of quality, that's what they did in the 80s, starting from the 80s. Improvement of quality, improvement of the business model, investment on reliability, investment on quality. So there was in the end a reaction, a positive reaction. But it took time, probably more time than necessary. Okay. So disruption in strategy is really something interesting to study and applies to many fields. Um, as you can see, is not necessarily connected with having a new technology. It's more about a business model. No, Toyota didn't have any new technology before this. The contrary, they had very low rate of technology. But they had a plan ahead. A plan, and that is a very important strategy that was conceived for many years to come. Having in place a plan and a vision that is long term is a powerful message from the point of view of management because it convinces consumers and shareholders and investors, generally speaking, that the interest of management is not short-timed. How many times, even nowadays, the interest, we have the perception when you are making investment that the interest of management is too much short-term. Then you have the doubt. Will the manager make this move, such as make an acquisition, a merge, a partnership, in order to maximize the profit of the shares or the future and the global income of the company and investment? The doubt is absolutely legitimate. If you have a long-term strategy, the message is, I, as a manager, I am interested in maximizing my own profit, but my vision is long-term. So I'm going, with my actions, to combine my interest with yours. It's a totally different message. So this is the story of Toyota, quite peculiar history. So from the point of view of, I pick up a couple of slides that could be interesting. Let me search. First of all, the one I mentioned, that is this one. Let's try to share if it's possible. Very simple slide, but explains almost everything. So, the slide is pointing to diversification strategy, but let's forget that for a while. So, a good strategic move, a good partner, a good action is the one where you can activate synergies, where, in other words, you have a premium price that the market pays somehow in terms of reputation, in terms of global profit, where the combination of two players yields a result that is not 1 plus 1 equal to 2, but 3 or more. So where you have price for synergy. That is true for every strategic move. This slide is then pointed especially to the diversification process. So to having a strategy connected with the growth through merger or acquisition with other companies. This is even more true, the fact that the market should recognize and believe in value created and not destroyed by this synergy. But this is generally true for every strategic move. You have to create value through strategic move. Let's go to the United States, the American market. Why? Is this creating an extra value, an extra perspective? You have to explain how, when. This synergy may have a short or a long-term return. But what really matters is to explain when and if there is a return. That is up to your investor, your shareholders, to say if they are willing to wait 1 year, 2 years, 10 years. But that has to be true. Think about the strategy of Amazon. how long Jeff Bezos stayed in a condition where they were selling their goods to a price that was not originating profit. They were losing money for more than 10 years. What was the strategy behind? To gain a very high share of the global market in order to be the platform for global market and then to rise prices again. That's what they did. So strategy makes sense if there is a synergy, if there is a value, if there is a value creation in a perspective of time that is the one that shareholders, managers expect. Not necessarily 6 months, not necessarily 1 year. But this needs to be true. Value creation through demonstration of the consistency of a business model, demonstration of the possibility of creating, having a much larger market share, the possibility of creating new products, meeting new needs. The way to control and to assess that this varies, it depends on the company. But this absolutely needs to be true and to be demonstrated. Concerning especially diversification through merger and acquisition process, a few things need to be said, I think. You can have a different way of diversification. The most common way of diversification is into your market area. So think about food industry. How you want to grow? You are not going to grow significantly as a market share, being a chain of supermarket, expecting that you do that only through sales. In the great distribution, the so-called great organized distribution, the chain of supermarket grow in their market through this strategy. No? Existing business acquisitions, gaining market shares through acquisitions, joint venturing with other companies in your own market. So the diversification process as part of either a defensive or, to be more honest, most of the cases an offensive strategy, could be diversification to all these means. Of course, every diversification through merger, acquisition, or joint venture has advantages and disadvantages. Let's see. It's rather obvious that you have a quick entry into an industry. That entry barriers are avoided, either because you as a company are already into that market, also the other companies do. The third goes under the name of economy of scale. So you have the access to complementary resources and capabilities. You are enlarging, conquering market shares through the aid of other companies that are similar to you. So you can right away assume to have a different distribution of the workforce, for instance, a different distribution of production and logistics. Still, you have access to a mine of complementary resources and capabilities. Applying a strategy, an offensive strategy, through acquisition has also a lot of possible disadvantages. I say that a strategy should generate a value, perceived value for the market. If you are overestimating the acquisition potential, you are not generating value, you are destroying value. And that sooner or later will be clear to the market that you overpaid. And that could represent a high problem because it prolongs the time that you need in order to gain a profit and to pay off the operation. The second point is very important. I recall your attention to that, the cost for integration. Uh, Having a strategy of diversification through merger acquisition and joint integration, especially merger acquisition, in general, always underestimate cost for integration. Um, Ask yourself why 9 times out of 10 time merger acquisition process goes wrong. And it's not only for financial reasons, mostly it's for that reason, integration. Where integration means the fact that from a strategic point of view, a company, as you probably now realize after our talks, is a very complicated mechanism. It's an organism. And merging with another organism is like merging two kinds of plants. No? Gardeners do that in spring. 9 times out of 10, sticking two plants, one in the body of another in a garden, goes wrong for the same reason. There are two organisms. Nobody knows exactly why sometimes, but for sure, uh, the potential of very negative turnbacks coming from company's culture, company's values, management styles, is very high. So underestimating those costs, the cost of integration, coming from unifying into a company managers and employees' minds could be a problem because it takes years sometimes to have clear that we are standing in one company. There are not two companies anymore. In between the years of many people, that is not true for many years after the financial program, the financial process is performed. They still believe to be in their own company. And that is going sooner or later to create problems. So there are a lot of advantages in this kind of operation, but also potential drawbacks. Diversification can should yield an acquisition premium. So as we said, that should exceed the pre-acquisition market value of target firm. Then you have a diversification that is not related to your own market, but is choosing a diversification in unrelated businesses. General Electric, for instance. General Electric has specific mission in doing that. What basically leads their strategy is not making a related, business-related diversification strategy, but to make follow, to pursue all the possible financial occasions to make profit and to generate value into different markets. What basically they export, let's call it like that, is not their know-how, is their business model. The ability of their management, in other words. The rationale of controls, back office services, integrated, full scale all over the world, in order to give chance to a certain business to perform at its best, and then to sell it. Venture funds do the same, no? So you can either diversify into related or unrelated business. Of course, if you do diversification in a not related business, you have different kind of risk, rather logical if you think. One of the first risks is connected to the fact that not only you have to take care that the synergy is providing a value, an extra value, but you need to know very well the market you are entering. There are two chances: or you believe you do, but you don't, or you really do. If you don't, so in other words, you underestimated some risk in entering the market, that can be a very painful moment. So entering and diversification into unrelated business, especially if you are not General Electric, so you don't have a very strong business model and know-how in managing all the back office processes. So bringing the new acquired company into the condition, even keeping the management that is already there, to concentrate only in the value chain segments of their own process that are generating value, given support in the secondary process, then you have a problem. So in order to diversify into unrelated business, you have to have very strong commitment and management and a strong back office and staff organization. In other words, a very recognizable business model and the capacity of to gain very soon market insight and understand the specific needs and I would say rituals in certain market areas. So what the company do strategically, they perform only related business or unrelated business diversification? No. From time to time they can do both. In general they do an hybrid because a company, especially nowadays, here I come to a point that is both financial but also philosophical. No? What is the trend of the mantra of the last years? No? Is to have a very quick access to capital markets. How you do that? If you want, for instance, contribution of very large international high reputation investment fund, if you want to make an IPO, no? So to go public, at least in part, you need to reach what is called the critical mass. What is the critical mass? For instance, here in Italy as well in Europe, I would say 1 billion euros of profits or revenues. Sorry, 1 billion euros. Okay. That means that you have to do both things. Imagine you are a group, family-owned group that owns 100, 200 millions revenues every year, and you have to go public. You hire consultants, you hire structure for that. Then you say you want to go public in 5 or 7 years. The only way to do is to practice both things. So, from one side, related business acquisitions. You need to gain, to buy in the end a portfolio, revenues, no, more than market share, to raise the bar in the sense. But probably your consideration is also to do and to take all the chances you have also in unrelated or slightly unrelated area of business that you can consider even complementary business, but are considered remarkably far away from your core business because they represent a financial chance to raise your profits, to raise your revenues. In other words, to reach the critical mass. So, why I say that is also philosophical? Because it depends a bit on times. Let's say that there is an exaggeration in that nowadays. So, the path of diversification as is written in manual like Thompson. Seems a very good practice and seems always driven by logical facts, you know, in step with graduality. But most of the times it doesn't happen like that. There is, in other words, uh, very high pressure from the market. But once you follow strategy of diversification, the rhythm, the rate of this process grows, doesn't stop. So if you have the idea to go public, to going up in 5, 7 years, 5, 7 years, you keep on buying, no? And it's very difficult to stop this process. So that, for instance, especially when you have remarkable, very high uh, mass of capital to invest, you do that sometimes even at the expenses of a very deep process of due diligence in the acquisition target. Think about companies like Facebook, like Google, like Apple. What they did, having Amazon, having a huge quantity of capital, they keep on buying companies, spin-off companies. Then they see what happens within 2, 3 years. What happened with Boston Dynamics, the robotic company. Didn't work out with the model. Okay, we sell it. So what happens? In order to grow and to make this growth process quicker and quicker, sometimes the company are bought in bunches of companies without performing a very in-depth due diligence process in order to reach the main target. And that can bring to wrong turns sometimes, especially if it becomes only a financial process, like sometimes happens. So what I'm trying to tell to you that as soon as this is possible, always try to fight with the concept of making good sense for your acquisition processes. Finance shouldn't be the only leader of the operation. The operation should make good sense from industrial point of view. Because that's if they don't, sooner or later that will turn against you. No? Company should lead the process, not finance. Finance, and we live in times where finance took the leadership, overcoming 3 times the real brackets economy. No? Finance is only 3 times in value the real economy. That's a problem. And it will be a problem. It is a problem. Finance is the instrument that the company uses in order to grow, not the contrary. So these processes should, of course, be part of the strategic picture. But I would say either if they are related, better, or unrelated, be careful. Always make sure that they make good sense. Because it's true, market will give you high standing if you do that in very short amount of years. But it's also true that you are homologating your company if you're falling only finance. You're losing that uniqueness, or you have the risk of losing that uniqueness. So doing things with graduality seems to make you losing opportunities in a short time, but will bring back opportunities in the long term. And this is exactly the problem. Finance is looking to short term. Sometimes also managers do. So here, in this very simple slide, you have a lot of the present situation of the economy. A tool, in strategic terms, never should prevail on the global view. A tool stays a tool. Finance is a tool. It's not the aim. So we're talking about the path. The path is made of steps and is made of time scale. So acquisition process, as I mentioned, towards either with the related business. So as Thompson says as a definition, related business that possess competitively valuable cross-business value chain and resources match up. So the cross-business value chain and the resource match-up are the real keywords. Or unrelated business that have a dissimilar value chain and resource requirements with no competitive important cross-business relationship at the value chain level is important. But you always have to perform in terms, a strategic fit. Strategic fit that is related to the concept of time, path, and opportunity. So even if there are different value chains, they should represent the opportunities of sharing know-how, transferring resources and capabilities. As I say, General Electric doesn't have the same value chain for all the business, but they are able to transfer resources and capabilities. Applying to unrelated business, the business model that proved to be successful in other areas. So that is true. From the point of view of value chain, the best way to see if the strategy is related or unrelated is to compare the value chains. So simple it is and so complicated at the same time. So you can share part of the value chain, you can enable this possibility of transferring resources or capability if comparing the value chains of the target company, of your own company, some of the measures are possible. No? You can imagine either to share some of this area. For instance, you may think that you can share sales and marketing. Did you buy a company which is selling complementary product to yours? Why don't you imagine to have the same sales network? No? Or even to deal with the same distributor. The same for technology. An acquisition may make sense from the technological point of view because you're sharing the same software, the same e-commerce, the same IT structure. For many reasons, it's very easy for you to merge because you're sharing the same IT ecosystem, IT infrastructure. Or the concept, the advantage may come from operations. You come to the point that you realize that you have strong value chain. Your problem is that you are not performing the full capacity of your plants. You invested so much in your facilities, and that you see that the general employment of your facility is 70%, 60%, 80%. And you ask yourself, how can I make 100% using my plants at its full capacity? An alliance or a joint venture could be the answer if it's saturating this capacity. Supply chain is another reason, and it's rather obvious. No? Think about Porter model, 5 forces model. You may think that you are willing to enlarge your capacity of bargaining with suppliers, having just one voice, and then you make a joint venture. What IT companies or automotive companies do with some of their suppliers? They do exactly that. They buy together, and then they produce differently, but chips, part of the cars or motorcycles are bought in common with the same prices. Because it's easier to do that. It's cheaper to do that. No? In the end, fighting in that direction wasn't productive at all, even for competitors. So they make an alliance in that area. So distribution, for instance, is one of the biggest global joint venture there is Think about the millions and the millions of companies that are using Amazon as their distribution system. What they do, they outsource their part of the distribution value chain to a partner. Hmm? So, providing opportunities and looking for opportunities is playing this game very carefully. Of course, diagrams are much more complicated than this, but sharing a view, no, of your company and targets and reasoning in this way, no, the value that you are generating is bigger where almost those areas, all those areas are able to deal or to merge with each other, to talk with each other. No? So this is reepilogated also in this scheme. No? These 6 areas are explaining the most, I would say, the most, maybe not the total, but the most of the reason why you are looking for diversification. You are looking for a business partner or a joint venture. Because one, or if you are lucky, all these areas share an advantage if you do that move. Is clear what I'm saying? Okay. Then you have to think about the scheme, no? Because once you are activated a process of the diversification, so you are acquiring or merging with another company, you have to activate also economies of scope, not just scale. And to realize this, you have to mainly act in these 4 areas that are quite difficult to perform, and they have to be planned definitely in advance. Because it's very easy to say transferring specialized and generalized skills and or knowledge. But it's hard to do, to perform that. It needs to be planned. Because of course, once it's seen, is saying that there are these chances. Another kind of achievement is to realize that. Transferring skills means training, means to have managers and employees, technicians working next to each other for a consistent period of time, no? So trusting each other, overcoming barriers of all kinds, not just technical, but also cultural, linguistic, no? The point of view of achieving lower cost seems also easier, no? But for instance, imagine to merge, no, the procurement office. Let's make one procurement office. Involves also a very powerful approach to human factor. No? Who is having the responsibility? Generally speaking, you may think that the acquiring company is controlling every kind of the value chain, every aspect of the value chain. But what if the target company shows beyond every doubt that they have better and more consistent capacity in certain areas, for instance, procurement office. You have to deal with the concept of responsibility, not always in other terms. This means that the acquiring company is taking the responsibility of an area. You may be ready to give the responsibility also to management of the acquired company, not the acquiring company. And that again involves trust, and that again involves overcoming certain cultural barriers and identity barriers. The concept of leveraging brand names and differentiation. Think how many strategies there are there in the market, endless. There are companies that are like P&G that thought about an umbrella brand, a very powerful umbrella brand. There are groups that are absolutely not thinking about that.
where, in other words, you know that the company is partnered with another company. If you are interested in financial process or if you are reading a report, it's written nowhere. The interest of the acquiring company is to keep autonomous the brand with no interferences. There are groups that are choosing a way in between. So Siena company is acquiring Florence, and Florence become Florence, a Siena company. Could be. So there is a parenting of brands, but still the brands are differentiated. There are acquirers that absolutely cancel or put in a very, very secondary place the acquired brand. So all these strategies concerning brand names, differentiation, or creating umbrella brand answer to possible strategic targets. They are not casual. They're not just done for fun. So, and they are complicated. They involve previous license agreements. They involve reputation. They may destroy value, even value that you are not conscious of. You may, for instance, underestimate what the brand means in a certain country or geographic area, and thinking that your brand, just because you're the strong acquiring company, overcomes that. But in the end, you're losing customers. So it's very sophisticated. The fourth is the ambition of every acquiring company, and this is the most difficult to realize. Using cross-business collaboration and knowledge sharing. It's very difficult. The cross-business collaboration and the knowledge sharing means two things from the strategic point of view that are very important. First, that you are able to and willing as a manager and worker of a group to move to another company to use your know-how in order to help another company of the same group. To use your know-how and collaboration in order to activate all kinds of synergy and to exploit all kinds of possibilities to raise the revenue of a company in the same group. And knowledge sharing means even more, being able to create inside the group a place, either physical or virtual, or occasions, either physical or virtual, to share knowledge, your own knowledge, as a parenting company, sharing with the others that were maybe formerly competitors. This is an objective which is very important because it's realizing exactly a part of that added value I was mentioning before, but is between these 4 points, the one that in generally speaking requires more time. Because there is a limit. As a manager, you can give the chances to do that. You can build up the instruments and the occasions to do that, but this stays really in the attitude of people. Huh? So those 4 areas represent really huge chance to make profit, to make growth for companies that are activating acquisition of other companies. But their difficulties increase from left to right, I would say. Okay? It involves less and less financial aspect and more cultural aspects. It's like if what is clear for you as a CEO of a company, as a manager, so the fact that the acquisition may generate a value becomes as clear in the mind of all people in the company. Top management, middle management, responsible of technical areas, workers, employees, collaborators, consultants, that everybody shares the same view. Consider the investment in human resources and long-scale investment. We have seen many examples. The last one with Toyota, no? They start to involve people in the companies in 1962, They saw the first result after 8 years. So it takes time to do this. There are questions? Because otherwise for me, it's okay. Then we see each other on Monday, okay? Okay.